Did you download that on your computer?
Go. All right. Well, I think we're good. There's a lot of plugging in up here. Well, it's good to see you all again. I know you all from phone calls, but I don't know your faces as well. Could you just say your names real quick and go around so I can connect memories of your written down name and phone calls with your face again? If you start. Jocelyn. Oh, all right. Hey, Jocelyn. Nelson. Dan. Layla. This is Nova. Natalie. Kayla. Florence. Leslie. Dara. Katie. And Jen. And Dee. All right. It's interesting how you've spread yourself around the room. We're three little clumps of people. Well, I'm excited for you. So you got to go to the White House, the Capitol building today? Did anyone talk with an actual senator or congressperson? Were they all representatives for the representatives?
Yeah.
Fun. Yeah, I've never been in that building, but every day I present in the last couple of years, it's right after you do that. So I feel like you're all very special when you come back from the Capitol building and doing important things while I'm just in my pajamas working on slides. But anyway, you had a more exciting morning probably than I did. So do you remember a long time ago that when we had AMFT in September, we talked about a little bit about regression, a little bit about path analysis, and a tiny little bit into SEM, I believe. We talked a little bit about why research matters, why it's important, how it can be useful for us. So today we're picking up from there, but with mediation and moderation. So my goal for today is that all of you understand what mediation and moderation is. You know which one you're supposed to be testing, and you know how to test it, and you know how to interpret it. This is probably one of the more common things when I'm reviewing articles for any journal in our field or out of our field, where people really mix these up really bad. Like the whole theme of their paper is mediation, but or what they think it was supposed to be mediation, but they really should have been doing a moderation, and they tested the wrong thing, and they're writing about it incorrectly. But they sound really similar, mediation, moderation, but they're totally different things. We test them totally differently, and we talk about them differently. So hopefully that you will never be part of that crew that submits a paper where you did the wrong analysis, you talked about it wrong, the whole paper. It's actually really painful to review those. So puts your reviewer in a bad mood. All right. I'm also going to try something with Kahoot today that might not work. So this is my first time. I was playing with it this morning, and it was working by myself in my hotel room. So maybe it will work here. How many of you downloaded it onto your phone, by show of hands? Only a couple? Okay. Well, we'll try it with the couple that we've got. Okay, and we've got M+. How many have M+ on their laptop right now? Enough that we can share? Okay, most of us. Good deal. Okay, so I guess we'll get started. I don't have a big pep-up speech, because normally it's like one continuous thing before, but I do hope that you value research and that it's important to you to try to do what we can to help elevate our field and strengthen what we know about couples, families, people, and how to help. With Christy Solosky, we wrote a book at we wrote a chapter in a book, much smaller venture, on mediation and moderation. Got asked to, but anyway, so most of my ideas we put into this chapter, and I initially made these slides for a class at K-State, so a lot of it comes from there. So this is affectionately called the gut check. Dun-dun-dun-dun. If somebody asked you to be able to clearly describe the difference between what mediation is and what moderation is, would you be able to tell them what they both are? By show of hands, how many of you feel comfy that, oh yeah, I can tell you what the difference is right now? A couple? A few, actually. Well, does several mean four? Always like a couple, few, several. I think it worked up to several. But But if we do know a little bit about what it is, would you know how to describe how to test it if somebody said, so what's actually a good way to test it? Now that if you know what it is, how can we test it with it? I've got this data set, and I was wondering if you could help me. Do you know at NCFR, when I was a doc student, I remember there was 2 people I helped in the same little 1-hour period of, so how do you bootstrap to test mediation? Like, well, do you have a laptop in M+? I can show you right now. But it is helpful for us to be able to know actually what they are and how to test it. Because in all of our research questions, you're going to hit a point, if you haven't already, where you're going to need to test for indirect effects and to test for interacting effects. All right. And this bottom part, would you attempt to defer? I thought this was hilarious. I hope none of you can ever figure out who it is when I'm passively throwing other people under the bus. But I went, many years ago when I was a student, I went to a round table at NCFR with a fellow, like a fellow meaning they're like, you know, a super well-regarded researcher, and the round table was on moderation and how to test moderation. And so I just remember asking the person, you know what, I just ran my first moderation not that long ago, but I don't know how to make the figure. How do you make the interaction figure that you put into your paper? And this person asked me lots of questions for like 5 minutes about my theory and helped me to explain what I'm doing. And I got all that. I just need to know, how do you make the figure? And finally the person said, I have no idea. But this person had been a professor for at least 35 years. It's way over 100 pubs, like super well regarded as a quantitative researcher. And I just remember being shocked, like, really? I mean, I know I don't because I'm just a doc student, but you're like a fellow at a round table presenting yourself as an expert on moderation. You can't do moderation without making a figure so people know how to make sense of it. So anyway, I've had that happen a few times in my life where people seem to know a little bit about it, but actually how to test it themselves and make sense of it themselves is sometimes a totally different thing. So my goal, again, I want you to know what they are and know how to test them. And the reason I think it's pretty sad that more people don't really understand mediation and moderation is it has huge possibilities to elevate our field in a really meaningful way. If we understand how things happen, step-by-step processes of how things happen, and if we understand what context those things that process might actually work and the contents for when it might work, we talk about context a lot in our field, don't we? Sorry, you're in a weird, almost in a circle, so I'm gonna have my back to a lot of people. Sorry, I'll try to move around so it's not always the same people. But if somebody was to tell you context doesn't matter at all, in therapy with people, it's not a big deal, just it is what it is, you gotta do this and that's what will work. What would you argue for? Why does context matter? And it might not matter. Really, maybe everybody should just do the same stuff. So much easier if that would be the case.
Context gives us valuable information.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it gives us valuable information. It does.
I'm struggling with the context of your question. So I'm afraid you're my answer to in what context do we need context?
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's true.
It just gives us the background we need to answer questions and do that effectively.
Yeah. So if I was to say, don't spank kids ever, that's a bad thing. I bet a lot of your personal beliefs are like, yes, preach on, don't hit kids. But in some contexts, it's pretty normal, and actually if you don't do it, maybe it's associated with worse outcomes. You know, sometimes context totally changes what we think we should do as a clinician, right? Sometimes I want to do EFT with a couple because I really like EFT. But sometimes the context of what they're presenting with, like, oh, no, can't do EFT with them. I need to do this other. But we have all sorts of little switch points in our mind, don't we? For when, I'm working with this race, this gender, this situation, this context. Context matters a lot. We have to put context into how we think as a clinician, how we think as a researcher. So moderation, put our first little clue out there, is all about context. And what context does it matter? If your research question is all about varying contexts, this might be different with like a different type of person or a different kind of situation, then that's a moderation kind of question to be able to understand under what context should it work, should it not work, in what context should we not do EFT, what context should we do solution focused. All right, it's really important to understand the process. One of the reasons, sorry, now I'm talking a lot about EFT, but isn't it really nice that there's 9 steps? Do this, then do this. When you do this, then this should happen. And then after you've done that, do this, and then this should happen. And then after you've engaged the withdrawer, then we've got our next step, and we can soften a blamer. And then once we've done that, we can go into stage 3. But it's kind of nice to have little steps along the way. But mediation would be what we'd be testing when we want to understand about the steps of how something happens. What do you think? What might be some of the steps of how a couple falls in love? Traction. Then what? They see each other, they do the pinky wave, and a wink. Then what happens?
Going on a few dates.
Going on a few dates.
Meeting the family.
Meeting the family.
Lust.
Lust. Oh, baby. Right, lust and love and lust again. And but we have this process maybe of how things happen when people start to fall in lust or love. What might be some of the steps associated with a couple breaking up?
Lack of communication.
So they stop. We'll just stay with EFT. They become less and less vulnerable and open with each other, right? It gets awkward and uncomfortable, and so they stop sharing as much authentic parts of them, and they start becoming more fake and growing apart. Good, that could happen. Then what might happen? Conflict, disagreement. We're fighting about. We're having one of those nothing fights where I don't even know why we're fighting. I don't even care about this. My kids have these nothing fights. Are you really arguing about that? Do either of you really care? I don't care. I don't want to hear you fight about it either. But we're fighting about randomness, and that's making things worse. If you think about whatever your research areas are, there's probably steps that you, in your own mind's eye, you think this might be how this develops, this might be how this progresses. That would be mediation, kind of testing this process of how things develop. And then the context, moderation, would be when does this process not work that way? It's not that way for everybody. Maybe it's only that way for 15 to 17-year-old relationships. But for 40-year-old couples, it's maybe that context is totally different. So age moderates it. So it's a different kind of way we would look at it then. I hope for all of us, we are no longer associated with X being associated with Y, this predictor associated with that outcome. This is super simplistic, and honestly, most of the time it's already been done dozens of times, if not much more than dozens of times. So an example of X associated with Y would be, do family relationships, are they linked with substance use? There would have been a lot of papers on that by now, right? But what's helpful to build upon that is to look at it dyadically, to look at it longitudinally, to look at the mediating process of what types of family relationships, how things change, how that could be linked with substance use, moderators of that, when sometimes maybe having a really, one of those moments where it's really uncomfortable and awkward and the whole family sits around and says, Nelson, you've got a serious alcohol problem, and we're all gathered together because we're really worried about you, and we're worried about, and that's uncomfortable and awkward, but maybe that context helped to make something better happen. We need to understand how things happen and in what kind of contexts and situations they may be more or less likely to happen. I was thinking about this in my mind, but this picture of this master switch here, like, in what context does this master switch work to where our ideas actually work? And in what context do they not work? Have you ever had a session where it went really well, and then you tried the same thing in the next session and it bombed really bad? And you're like, it was so sweet last week when I did this. It was awesome. It was like, wow, look how good I am. And then this week, they gave me this weird look like I was an idiot. But that master switch, moderated, didn't enough, why it worked there, and the same thing didn't work here. But we can advance so much as clinicians and researchers if we have a better sense of moderation, of when should you try that? When is Bowen Schnark's idea, when is that the very best thing you should be doing? And when should we not? Right now it's generally just our theory of change of, well, I think. But we could actually test it too, for wonder what context is it more useful to do certain things. So again, less helpful to do a study on if this negative behavior is associated with relationship satisfaction. Yeah, bad behaviors are probably associated with lower relationship quality. But some things we can add on to this would be, how does that happen? How does this rude thing I say or do to my wife, how does that, what are the processes of what's happening as that affects her relationship quality? It affects her thinking about me, like, my husband doesn't care about me, he's a selfish jerk, yeah, I'm not going to talk to him. And what are all those little steps that kind of happen? And then under what conditions maybe is having a slightly rude negative behavior maybe actually even helpful, if any. So to advance our field, understanding what mediation is, what moderation is, and how to test them can really move us forward and be super helpful. And although they've existed a super long time, since the early 1900s, probably, we've found new ways to test them that are much more exciting and new just in the last decade or so. So mediators establish how or why one variable might affect another, whereas a moderator is going to test when and for whom. And when we're focused on things with LGBT, with race, with gender, some things, we need to do things a little bit differently, right? For this and that, to make sure that we're being the most, I don't do the same therapy with everybody I see. It's a little bit, I try to do what I think will be most helpful for everybody. But in general, we are all doing that in our own ways, but trying to find when and for whom it can be most helpful. So if you're a little fuzzy, and I would guess maybe all of us to some degree, maybe a tiny bit of fuzziness, hopefully now, can you all commit? I will learn what mediation and moderation is. 4 hours from now at about 6 o'clock, I will be able to tell those people in the other room, do you know what mediation is? I do. This is what it is. Do you know what moderation is? Let me tell you what it is. Do you know how to test it? This is how we test it. All right. You know what? I've had a few papers rejected in my life that I think were really, really good papers. I think the best paper I've ever been a part of so far is with a girl named Sarah Lynn at University of San Francisco. And it's really good. It's really good, I think. It's been rejected at least 3 times now. But we've been aiming for really good journals, but I think it deserves to be up there. But it keeps getting kicked back to us. So now it's the JMFT, and I'm expecting that it'll go in there. Is there another mic in here, Grace? No. Maybe I'm too close to that one. All right. Well, if it comforts you to know, this paper was rejected by Journal of Personality and Social Psychology because the editor said, well, this is obvious. Everybody knows what mediation and moderation is. This is not new. This is not exciting. No, we're not going to publish this stupid little paper. But the new editor came on shortly after that. They resubmitted it. It got accepted this time, and now it is the most cited paper ever in Journal of Personality and Social Psych, one of our better journals in social science. Most cited ever. But apparently there was a lot of people that are like, what is mediation and moderation? So it's not just a simple little thing of that we often believe. So I've got some definitions of mediation and moderation from them that I normally read right here. But moderator, we'll see how close I can get to Barron and Kenny's definition of it. But a moderator, so the same thing between mediation and moderation is they both have the same number of syllables. They both start with M. Sounds similar if you say it really fast. So how do you think we should test this? Yeah, right. So this is their definition, defined by them in their paper. A moderator function of third variables which partitions a focal independent variable into subgroups that establish its domain of maximal effectiveness in regard to a given dependent variable. And I remember as a grad student reading that about 10 times, like, don't think I totally get it. So, this is the Jared definition. I have a very simple brain. I appreciate that people think nice things about me, but I'm a very simple person. This is how I would define moderator. Moderator is any variable that changes the relationship between a predictor and an outcome. So, in both cases, can I just call this predictor and outcome? So in mediation and moderation, we've got a predictor and an outcome. What's different is in moderation, we believe that we're trying to change this association right here, to change it in some other way. In my mind, I was picturing train tracks when I was working on revising these slides a few days ago, but instead of going this way we thought it might go, it goes this different way in this different kind of context. So a moderator variable, again, changes what we thought we knew and about an association. So that maybe in general, when couples have their first baby, the relationship quality deteriorates a bit. In general, that's what happens. But what can moderate that to change it to be something different than what we were expecting might happen before? Mediator, defined in this paper, is the function of a third variable again, which represents the generative mechanism through which the focal independent variable is able to influence the dependent variable of interest. So now the moderator changed this association, but the mediator is now kind of a stepping stone up here. So mediator. So the mediator is kind of a step from here to here to here, whereas the moderator leaning downhill a little bit. But the moderator, we draw it this way because we believe it's changing this association in some way or another. So, this is a peaceful picture to me. This is how somebody was talking about it in class last time I taught SEM, and I thought it was a cool way of talking about it. But for me, a mediator is just any time we've got a situation where a predictor has some influence on a mediator, and that mediator has some influence on the outcome. It's kind of like stepping stones, that it goes from here to here to here to here to here to here to here, or A to B to C. This A predicting B, B predicting C. B is the mediator because it's in the middle. We can have lots of mediators, or we can have a whole long line of mediators, like this little line of rocks here. All right. Anyone at Loma Linda? We have a couple, right? Isn't there two? Maybe.
She's not here.
Okay. So you know Brian Cafferkey?
I'm in his class right now.
This is from Brian. Tell Brian hi for me. But I remember Brian a long time ago when he was still a doc student. Brian, when he was starting to understand what mediation and moderation is, he's like, it's like a frisbee then. Like mediation is like when a frisbee goes from here to here to here to here, and like a moderator is if like a dog jumps up, bites the frisbee, and like takes it. So instead of the frisbee going where you think it's going to go, it goes somewhere else.
He used that example in my class.
Yeah. Well, that's because it's from him. This is citing Brian Cafferkey, 2000, whenever that would have been. All right. We do a little demo.
Can you go back just for one quick second?
Yes. This is the most athletic looking people I could find playing frisbee. Normally it's like... Oh, and I'm going to give you these slides. I'll email everybody the PDF of them. Did you have a question about it or just writing it down?
Writing it.
Oh, no, I don't want you to write it down. I give all my students all my slides. So they're yours too. All right. So I need a couple volunteers that are mildly athletic. Not that level, but like stand and that level. Yeah? Yeah, I'm going to need at least 5 probably. All right, stand on up.
Okay.
Do you want to come up too? All right. Who feels comfortable joking about their sexual satisfaction? All right. Okay, so this frisbee is going to represent an effect. Dan? Eugene. Dan. Okay. All right, Dan is going to be our outcome.
That's me.
We've got oh, gosh, Eugene. Sorry, I have you in my head wrong right now. Eugene. Eugene is going to be our outcome variable. We're going to call this male sexual satisfaction. So not necessarily Eugene, but a sample of hundreds of people that we're working with. Men's sexual satisfaction. All right, so this is Eugene's sexual satisfaction is our outcome. We have you stand over here a little bit. What do you think might predict men's sexual satisfaction?
Age.
If you had an orgasm, age. Sounds good. Should we go with one of those? Age. All right. So how do you think sexual satisfaction changes with age? It actually goes up. You know what's interesting is the more cellulose you have, the more varicose veins you have, all those things are associated with higher sexual satisfaction. So the older you get, the better it gets. To the shock of all 18-year-olds out there. It's better for my parents than for me? That can't possibly be true. But it is. Okay. No, just good things coming. So we've got men's sexual satisfaction here. Do you want to represent age? Layla, you toss it to Layla. I got the easiest frisbee I could find to throw and catch, so we can all highlight our athletic skill here. All right, so Layla is age. So Layla, throw it back down to Eugene. So this is the effect age has to sexual satisfaction. It gets better. The little bigger we get in our stomachs. And it's associated with better things sexually. Who knew, right? And maybe not in all studies, but in a few that I'm familiar with. Okay, so this is a direct effect. What might be something an indirect effect? What else might age predict that might then predict sexual satisfaction? Do you think it's just the nature that we're older and that we have more gray hair that makes us have better sexual relationships?
Relationship quality?
Yeah, length of time that you've known that person.
So maybe age is more, it's not age necessarily, but it's more the length of time. Okay. Who wants to be length of time? You want to come down? You scoot back a little. Can you toss it all the way down to Layla now? Let's see. Yeah.
Is it length of time with a partner or length of time having sex?
Length of time. With a partner is what I was.
Okay.
Sure, length of time with the partner. Pass it down.
But all the way down.
This one is just to get it started again, wherever you want. It's good.
Off the wall.
Woo! Okay. So Layla is now age. So we now have an indirect effect, right? Layla, could you toss it down? So mediator. So age to how long we've been together as a couple. And how long we've been together as a couple might fully mediate this relationship insofar that age might no longer have a significant association with sexual satisfaction or accounting for this mediator. What else might be potentially between here? How long you've been together and sexual satisfaction. It might be more than just how long you've been together and sexual satisfaction. What might be in the middle there? Intimacy and trust. We'll say we put that together as one latent variable. Do you want to be intimacy and trust? All right, send it down again. Being careful with the water, that's probably good. Laptops bubbling, exploding. All right, so let's do an indirect effect from age to length together, length of time together, to intimacy, to sexual satisfaction. So in real life, could we see these stepping stones of this is something that happens, right? So this is an indirect effect. We might have a ton more in real life, there might be almost infinite numbers of mediators, right? In a study, we have to keep it simple enough to write one paper with a cohesive theme. But we could do something like this as a paper. So we could say, is it really, belly fat that's associated with better sex? Or is it more how long we've been together and then increases intimacy and trust and is... Maybe this will be my last EFT reference. I don't know why it's on the brain. But as Sue would say, the best thing for our sex life would be a really loving, trusting, close romantic relationship here. And it all leads to the sexual relationship. All right, now we need a moderator. So send the frisbee. That doesn't even seem like a frisbee, whatever that is. You come on down for us. So between age and... length of time together, right? Okay. Age and go between the two of them, if you could. This is where it gets dangerous. So there should be an association, right, between age and how long we've been together. What might moderate that? Instead of what we think they both co-vary and go together, right? The older you are, the longer you've been together. What could potentially change that so it doesn't work that way? Health?
Yeah, right. Yeah, health, physical health.
They're not healthy. Maybe they're not together anymore, or maybe they even died. Okay, so extreme physical health kind of getting in the way. Oh, sorry. Do it again, Layla. But this time, instead of catching it, I just want you to redirect it. You can tip it.
Like that.
There you go. There you go. So instead of what we thought was going to happen, it went different. Do you know this moderator variable can send the effect the total other direction. Do you think you could whack it behind Layla's head? Try again. Oh, yeah. We should be wearing helmets for this. But sometimes what we think should be going a certain direction, like the older you are, the longer you've been together, sometimes moderator variables can totally flip what we think should be an obvious direction of effect. And what's nice about moderators is they're never obvious. It's like, oh, real? Oh, yeah, okay. So that totally changes it. Why don't we go intimacy now? We have our moderator move on down. You were intimacy, right? Can we send the frisbee down? To intimacy.
Nice.
That was a good throw.
That was good.
We need to go out to the Washington Mall and play frisbee. We're doing a stats exercise. We have to take the subway. All right, scoot over a little bit down. And our moderator, what might get in the way? But I think it makes perfect logical sense that the more trust and intimacy you have, probably should have a better sexual satisfaction most of the time, right? What might be a contextual situation where the more trust you have might not necessarily be linked with higher sexual satisfaction? Communication. So give me an example of how communication might kind of screw that up.
If you have frequent disagreements, then that means you not to.
Yeah, that makes sense. I trust you. I know you're not going to cheat on me. We've been together for a long time, but I can't stand you right now. Okay, scoot down a little bit. Moderator, you want to do your thing? Oh, this way. So to sexual satisfaction. If you could scoot down a little bit this way. So what we think is going to happen, can you redirect this for us? Good. So in real life, we have moderated mediation all the time, don't we? There's indirect effects that affect our mood. The reason you feel the way you do today is because you got this amount of sleep, you got to go talk to a congressperson and they said they liked your shoes, and you're like, oh, people in Congress like my shoes. It's a great day. And other things happened along the way that made it a good day for you, but then one moderator happened and then Something awful on the metro. I don't know, something you observed like, oh my gosh, that was shocking, or what, and it changed things for you. What you thought was an expected effect changes it. In real life, our whole life is nothing but a series of moderated mediations, right? Indirect effects that can get changed by all sorts of different things. Does that make sense a little bit? So when the Frisbee is going from person to person to person to person, what is that representing? Mediation. When our moderator kind of, oh, no, I just gave that one away. Let me try again now that it's a really hard question. Moderation, right. But when that Frisbee gets redirected a way we weren't expecting, that's moderation, right? We were playing on the Washington Mall, some random group of middle schoolers that are all over that area right now ran and grabbed our Frisbee and just took off running. That would have moderated what we thought would have happened, right? Okay, is this making a little bit of sense? Mediation, moderation, redirects, and changes. Yeah, and our sexual satisfaction here totally varies by these indirect effects, right? These indirect effects lead to his sexual satisfaction, but all sorts of things can change his sexual satisfaction, right? What else might change this expected association here with his sexual satisfaction? What else might get in the way? Sexual dysfunction. So maybe if all these other things work great, sexual dysfunction might moderate that, right? That maybe for whatever reason it's painful or we can't get an erection or maintain an erection, that there's all this intimacy and time together. They've got the varicose veins, everything should be like we're hoping it will be, but because of sexual dysfunction that, do you know what one of my most successful couples, after EFT, after a little while of things going well, it just turned out they hadn't talked after their first round of sex was so awful on their wedding night. They chose to wait till the wedding night. He couldn't get an erection. And then they didn't talk about it again for a couple of years until they were in therapy with me. Didn't even try again. It's just this awful, uncomfortable thing for them. And he was just on medication. That was it. We got rid of the medication that was taking away his depression meds that wouldn't allow him to get an erection. And